Yes, I did release this video on December 6th because the tie-in book comes out today. Now, if you're watching this as a fan of Amphibia, first of all, thanks for coming. But please know, if any of you spoil the Marcy journal in the comments, I will find you. Also, spoilers. If you haven't seen this show and you want to, go binge it on Disney+. Then you can watch me ramble about it for however long this video turns out to be. That out of the way, let's discuss the Frog Show. What am I doing? Something I should have done a long time ago. Making a video about Amphibia. Because I owe it to this cast and crew. This show seriously means a lot to me. I've really wanted to for a while now. Only issue is, right when I got into making scripted, edited YouTube videos, the show ended. This has nothing at all to do with my opinion of the show changing for the worse in retrospect. I just wondered what to do now that the show is no longer pushing out anything new. A retrospective, of course. Just a heads up, this video is going to be long, purely because, to explain what Amphibia means to me, I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of everything, my history with the show, and in what ways it truly did change my life. To make the bold statement, this was my favorite cartoon in recent years. Technically, shows such as Gravity Falls and The Owl House are better than Amphibia. They're just generally more tightly written and better paced. But I like Amphibia more. It resonates with me the most personally, even if the show as a 3-act story does get a little structurally messy. And as much as I praise the show's balance of plot-heavy episodes with one-offs, it can be as much of an asset as an issue. But I enjoy Amphibia more than some other Disney shows because it isn't perfectly made. My time with Amphibia taught me that we're all changing and improving and learning as we go. Considering the personal transformation Anne went through over the series, I'll say right now that the show started and ended right at the perfect time for me personally. What's that? Elaborate further? We get there when we get there. I know it happens with a lot of modern cartoons with overarching stories, but it's crazy looking back on the low-key, cozy environment that Amphibia created throughout most of Season 1, and then making the way back to the present and seeing what the show became. This show went places I never would have expected. And even if I was completely unbiased towards this show, I can't deny that this show's high points are legitimately game-changing for Western animation as a whole. For the impact Amphibia had on me alone, this is the kind of show that deserves a legacy. It's so much more than just another piece of Gravity Falls offspring. And considering how far from perfect the show still is, this sounds to me like a pretty good show for a retroactive analysis video. Time to talk about the good, the bad, and everything in between. I started watching Amphibia in March 2020, during the hiatus between seasons 1 and 2. There was a rerun of an episode airing on Disney XD that day, there was nothing else on, I wasn't really watching any other shows at the time, and I had plenty of time to spare because, well, you know. It was a random episode, but I found it likable enough. This was when I decided I wanted to check out more. I figured I should have watched the other 30-something episodes at the time in order, so I binge-watched Season 1 on Disney+. And I was hooked! Anne was a grounded yet very fun and engaging protagonist, with a pretty cool, if slowly paced character arc throughout the season. Sprig was a pretty fun companion character, whose character is also pretty good ADHD representation. Hop Pop was easily the best of the main four, don't at me, and Polly, despite being the least developed of the main cast, was still a lot of fun with her love of weaponry and desire to watch the world burn. I also really liked a lot of the side characters like Loggle, Ivy, Mrs. Kroger, and especially One-Eyed Wally. However, characters and well-aged humor aside, how is Season 1 now that we can view Amphibia as a completed product? Quality-wise, a little worse, but thematically weirdly better. As much as I would go back to Season 1 for some of the cozy and comfortable episodes in the character's hometown, I have to say, a lot of it does just kind of feel like your typical kids' cartoon with silly jokes and moral lessons in the end. While I can forgive that since the show was mostly entertaining as it was, I think this is one of a few reasons this particular season had a lot of episodes that kind of blur together in people's minds, or why the show initially flew under many people's radars. If I had to guess, the other reasons for that were A. The format in which the first season aired. Okay, so to avoid confusion, I know I said I started watching Amphibia during the hiatus between seasons 1 and 2, and I did. So if you're wondering how I know season 1 aired in this daily episode format on the Disney Channel, there's this wonderful thing called looking up release dates on Wikipedia. It's helped me a lot with shows in understanding their production histories, and knowing what they went through as they made the shows. So if you didn't know, Amphibia Season 1 aired from June 17th, 2019 to July 18th of that same year. How did an entire season of 20 half hours air in a single month, you may wonder? Well, every week from June 17th to July 18th, 2019, Fans got 4 new episodes a week, every Monday through Thursday. This did not do anyone any favors. It was almost impossible to make theory videos, because videos take time to script and edit, which is less time than theorists were given, because chances are they would be proven wrong next episode, which would come out the next day. Existing fans didn't have a lot of time to introduce this great new show to friends, since the first season would be over so fast. Crew members were much less likely to get hired for future projects, since consuming one episode after the other with less time to process it makes people less likely to know which animators brought a specific scene to life, who directed what episodes, so on and so forth. And of course, going on hiatus so quickly and for dramatically prolonged periods of time, because so many episodes aired at once. But the almost year-long hiatus was just another shot in the foot for this show. People who were already watching had nothing new to talk about for so long, so people were even less likely to get on board. Almost no one was talking about Amphibia anyway, so having basically no sign of Season 2 for 11 months didn't help. All I can say is, thank God Disney figured this out, and Seasons 2 and 3 aired on a weekly basis, which is the exact kind of format to fix all of the aforementioned issues. The season airs over a longer period of time, so people have more time to be on the edge of their seats and predict the outcomes. There is more time for people to get into the show, and the hiatuses are much shorter and much more bearable. Not with Season 1, though! And B, the fact that there were just so many episodes. This is the one Amphibia season with no specials until the final episode, which is pretty common for most first seasons of 11-minute cartoons, but nevertheless. Most of the other episodes this season do follow that formula of Anne learning about Amphibia, she, Sprig, and sometimes Polly get into trouble, and they learn a lesson that they should probably know. Does the show at least do something to make the individual episodes more entertaining? Most of the time, absolutely. Does it ever get repetitive? Sure. But to its credit, these are some very talented writers who find a way to make simple lessons into something really creative and fun. Like the kids learning combat from Matt Chapman doing his best Antonio Banderas impression, and protecting the town while everyone in Wartwood freezes, or Anne and Sprig being cops for the day. My point is that there are just so many episodes that it can be hard to remember what exactly happens. 38 episodes up until the finale aren't just there to endear you to the main cast, though credit where it's due, it does certainly do that. It also makes the conclusion of Anne's character arc that much more believable. Seeing Anne finally stand up to Sasha and become more than a pushover while the entire Wartwood citizen body rallies behind her is very rewarding, and an honor that we were there every step of the way, even if the journey there was kinda bumpy compared to what the show became. What enhances Season 1 and makes it so much more important in retrospect is when you go back and see that Anne started the series, and obviously this season to that extent, at her absolute lowest. Watching Reunion, you see the toxic friendships Anne was going through, and how it all pushed her into Amphibia to begin with. And hey, some of the moral lessons are actually very valuable and make total sense for Anne to learn. Like how family is based on love, not blood, and no longer letting labels define oneself. Amphibia is the story of a teenage girl getting lost in another dimension, trying to find a way home, and instead found herself. She also found a way home, but not for a little while. Honestly, while Season 1 can be a bit of a slow burn, the season is that much more thematically rich for the fact that, in a show all about change and personal transformation, everyone feels a little younger in the first season, since they had not yet been impacted by the adventure they would be a part of. Some of them even sound younger. Probably a coincidence, but still. Seeing Anne put an end to a toxic friendship, Sprig standing up for his best bud, and more, made Reunion the moment this show reached new heights. I must admit, as much as I enjoyed the show first seeing it, I wasn't immediately getting next big story cartoon vibes from Season 1 alone. I went in thinking, why not check it out? This could become my favorite show. I have to say I became a huge fan, waiting just a little impatiently for Season 2. But this mostly seemed like a comfort show in a cute little village, with good comedy and a pretty fun cast, saving pivotal moments from exactly where you'd expect them. The ending of the first episode, the mid-season finale, and the actual season finale. All of those episodes are great, but there are a lot of one-offs in Season 1 in particular. I've already explained why that's not technically a bad thing, but could this show have an overall engaging serialized story to tell? Yes, definitely, absolutely. Season 2 is still my favorite season of Amphibia. I can't even imagine what it was like being an OG fan and waiting the whole year for this season. I could barely wait for 4 months. But if Season 1 made me a big amphibiac, Season 2 was bigger and better than Season 1, and solidified my love of the show. Where do I even begin, man? Amphibia did what I wish so many other shows would do. Make each season genuinely different from the last. Not feel different because it took a different approach to the existing status quo, but feel different because it created an entirely new status quo, and is different. Season 1 is the steady introduction to these characters in the small town of Wartwood. Season 2 is the season that takes place all throughout Amphibia, and Season 3 is the season where Anne's life back home is established, and the citizens of Amphibia prepare for the war that would lead to the end of the adventure. Season 1 did its job pretty well in getting me well acquainted with Anne and the Planters, but it was safe to say that things were about ready for a change. I mean, Anne is stuck in this entire new world, and we haven't seen much of what lies beyond Wartwood besides Toad Tower. Season 2 pulled up its pants, said, "Hold my Gatorade," and gave us a freaking feast of the world outside the valley. The trailer already had me hyped for what was to come, and the first few episodes that the Planters spend on the road to Newtopia do not disappoint. We get to go to a new place and a new fun thing to do almost every episode. Hotbot becomes a cowboy in an old western town. Polly becomes a trucker. Wait, what? Wally's living a double life? Gruckle Stan, what are you doing here? You're not a frog. It is all the fun I wanted and could have asked for. It's genuinely fulfilling to see how much was outside the world all along. But this show hadn't even lived up to its truest potential yet. For then we reached Newtopia, which was fun. But the pinnacle of the Newtopia arc was meeting Marcy, aka Best Girl.
We need to talk about Marcy. You were thinking about her too, huh?
There is no reason not to love this character. She's nerdy and clumsy, but super smart, and in all the most charming and cute as a button ways possible. I think it was a great move to make Sasha the more manipulative and pushy friend, whereas Marcy, as of now, is shown to be harmless and sweet. I'll get into why later on, but for now, I just want to talk about Marcy. Okay, warning in advance, this is where I really get into spoiler territory. Seriously, if you haven't watched this show, go do it. I feel as if I've barely talked about this season yet, but then again, you can't discuss Season 2 without talking in depth about Marbles here. But I'm already going to talk about True Colors. Or maybe not. I'm going to talk specifically about Marcy's role in that episode, because that's when Marcy is actually explored the most. Before the Season 2 finale, Marcy is a dorky, excitable goob, but the best character in the show for it. But the entire series, let alone Marcy's character, is recontextualized after the events of True Colors. Marcy found the Calamity Box that transported the girls to Amphibia in the first place on Anne's birthday. Marcy had her friends back home, but really not much else if you think about it. She was constantly stuffing her head in whatever fantasy JRPG she'd just got out of playing, really wanting to play D&D all the time, just really into that stuff. The more you think about it, the more you start to realize that Marcy probably had a crappy home life. Her only reasoning for getting Anne and Sasha stuck in Amphibia on purpose was because Marcy didn't want to lose the only people she had. She stated that it was all only because her parents were moving her away, but chances are it goes deeper than that. We never got to see Sasha or Marcy's parents, but from the little tidbit we saw at the beginning of True Colors, and how upset Marcy was, it seems like her parents didn't have any concern for Marcy's social and emotional wellness. Like I said, she had nothing but her friends left for her on this side. She didn't expect the box to work, but it did. Marcy had the most fun in Amphibia. While Anne got stuck living in a cave and Sasha was immediately thrown into prison for existing, Marcy got lucky, finding herself in this metropolitan seaside city where she was immediately treated to free public health care, meeting the king, learning a new version of chess, giant birds, a fantastical costume upgrade, and more. Not only was Amphibia a chance for her to change and find a way through this new world with all the new friends she made, not only did she receive escapism from the harsh reality she was looking for, she's living the exact sort of fantasy she's obsessed with. So it becomes that much more heartbreaking when she finally confesses all this to Anne and Sasha. It was all going so well for her that she truly thought she could get away with traveling to new worlds with her friends for the rest of her life. And unlike Sasha, who betrayed Anne multiple times throughout their time in Amphibia, Marcy's betrayal is pretty much already done and behind her. The girls' time in Amphibia has already shaped who they've become, but it was still selfish of Marcy and messed up in a lot of ways to get them stuck there without telling them why. This is why it was so smart, in my opinion, to make Marcy a nicer friend to Anne than Sasha was. If Marcy's relationship with Anne was as abusive as Sasha, Anne's character arc in Season 1 would become much more black and white. Season 1's synopsis states that Anne discovers the first true friendship of her life with Sprig. Of course, this made me and a lot of others think that Marcy pushed Anne around as much as Sasha did. This was before we met her in Season 2. But she was just a lovable goofball who was nice to Anne and Sasha, but was ultimately hard to be friends with, as she has a lot of interests that they didn't have. Most fans knew a betrayal was coming, so it hurts worse knowing what Marmar was already going through. And doubly so once the audience has finally gotten to know her. You really have to like this character. That's why the writers made sure to sell you on her adorable bean personality, and not just her debut episode, but the flashback where we get to see her in action back home. She was the one who set everything into motion, so if you aren't devastated by what she goes through at the end of Season 2, you probably didn't get attached to the one character who's the key to the show working. And if the episode that marks the point of no return and casts the entire series up to this point in a whole new light fails to impact you, would the show as an overarching story really work? Probably not.
You'll look at Season 2 and you'll be like, oh, cool, that's Marcy's season. If you aren't sold on this girl in the first 5 minutes of meeting her, I don't think the rest of the show will work.
Marcy stays a likable character upon rewatching Season 2, but this one episode made her one of the most tragic cartoon characters in recent memory. Now, if you've seen the show, I know what you all want me to talk about, but again, we get there when we get there. I still need to talk about Season 2. Point is, Marmar is very well written, wouldn't you agree? Sorry to talk about the end of the season so quickly. There are just so many banger episodes in this season alone. From great emotional episodes like Hopping Mall, A Day at the Aquarium, and After the Rain, to more plot-heavy aspects of the season, like the Temple arc and meeting King Andreas, who I have a lot to say about later on. Hop Hop became much more trusting of his grandbabies, Polly got a little more development when she got to be Frobo's big sister, and Sasha finally starts to have second thoughts about who she is. On the one hand, she's very good at deceit, but on the other hand, let's talk about the penultimate episodes of the season. The Dinner and Battle of the Bands. After recharging the Calamity Box completely, well, almost, all three girls are finally together once more. And Sasha and Grimes stay in Wartwood for a little while, so they can have some time to catch up with Anne and Marcy and bury the hatchet. In The Dinner, things get awkward and tense, as it takes time to clear the air with someone who tried to kill your found family the last time you saw them. Geniusly enough, Marcy doesn't tolerate Anne and Sasha fighting it out. But the important thing is, things get better by the end, even if the house burns. Sasha recognizes Anne's changed since they last saw each other, even if she doesn't really care deep down. Or does she? Enter the sister episode, Battle of the Bands. The day before everything is shattered, Wartwood decides to have a calm before the storm. The girls have a day to plan a song for the battle and get the garage band back together. But again, there's a dispute between Anne and Sasha. Not about the execution of loved ones and sparking civil war. This one is just Sasha being a control freak with the band instead of letting Anne perform her new single. Sasha leaves, saying that if she joins another band, she can be in control all she wants, while Anne and Marcy can perform their song, and in the end, they all get what they want. But this isn't what Anne and Marcy want. They just wanted a fun day to hang together like old times, and whoop-de-doo, it's just like old times. It's not until Sasha partners up completely platonically with Toadie, who's a total suck-up. Then Sasha realizes how boring it can be when people just agree with you all the time. Toadie points out that it can be fun to simply be supportive of friends, and that sometimes all that entails is being there for them. Not just being in control 24/7. Imagine how rushed it would feel if we went straight from the Third Temple to True Colors. Oh boy, it's great to be back together again! What's that? You're still a bitch even though we literally just got out of a rough patch and reconciled yesterday? We are no longer friends! In plenty of moments, but the best example is this genuine smile Sasha gives as Anne and Marcy perform No Big Deal. It is shown very well that Sasha does indeed care about Anne. She just needed a little friend advice from a tiny sad frog. And while Sasha doesn't really bring these events back up again, odds are she wouldn't have really have had second thoughts about her hostile takeover of Newtopia in the season finale if it wasn't for Toadie's advice. These two episodes were the ideal way to take advantage of a unique setup that we wouldn't have time for otherwise. All three girls are back together. They could go to Newtopia for the king to send them home anytime they'd like, but for now they're still in Amphibia, so they just have the time of their lives performing on stage in front of the world they've grown to love. By the way, what freaking genius noticed this detail? Like, that had to be intentional, how did I not notice? Also, this episode gave us the girls' band costumes and the No Big Deal song. Great stuff. When I saw the music video for Heartstomper posted on Disney's Music YouTube channel, I almost hoped that Battle of the Bands would be a full-on musical episode or Amphibia mixtape sort of thing a la OK Karaoke from Big City Greens, but this was pretty great too. Honestly, for how much The Dinner and Battle of the Bands enhances the show's past and future episodes, always watch this pair of episodes before watching True Colors. You owe it to yourself to make the watching experience all the better for it. Also, why is Grimes so charming and oddly cute here? Now, if you were in the show's fandom before True Colors, I'm sure you remember what happened next. About 16 hours before True Colors was scheduled to air, we got this tweet from Disney TVA. The episode was pulled and delayed indefinitely due to a scheduling shift. So before the episode was rescheduled, there was no content warning in the promo, and once the episode was back in our grasp, there was. Coincidence? I think not! This was insane, and killed a lot of momentum on the spot. Obviously, no fans wanted to wait longer, but because the schedule change was so last minute, guess what? The unreleased episode leaked onto iTunes. And you know what happens then? The community of people who illegally upload episodes onto YouTube get their hands on the episodes. And you know who can't avoid spoilers to save his butt from being possessed by an evil underground hive mind of geniuses? This guy! Yeah, I ended up seeing clips of the leaked episode posted onto YouTube. At that moment, I thought to myself, oh, it's probably just already come out. But then I saw Matt Brawley's Twitter, and I felt guilty with a capital G. I also realized just how effed up this whole situation was. Disney wronged this crew. They busted their butts off and worked hard like there was no tomorrow to make a season finale worth being proud of. And their reward was distribution hell and trending on Twitter for all the wrong reasons. But even then, I loved seeing the fan art and support from fans, all the audio recordings from cast members, all over social media in response to the incident. It's a trend I feel even worse for not participating in, because this show and this team deserved much better than how they were treated in this time. We should let this be a cautionary tale on why something like the delay and leak fiasco should never happen again. Because clearly, this was never supposed to happen and never should have. Oh hey, Bob Chapek's gone? But of course, when we actually got to see the official release, it was more than worth it. Anne has gone from standing up to Sasha's toxic, manipulative ways in the previous finale, to laying down the law and even cutting off her toxic friendship with her. Rightly so. Sasha finally truly gave off the impression that she was turning over a new leaf, and now she's lied to Anne and used her to take over a kingdom, all the while she was expecting Anne to just be okay with it. This was the last straw to end all last straws. Sasha finally breaking down and realizing that there really isn't anything left for her now that she's lost her friend for good is amazing. The starting sparks of a redemption she needs after all she did to be in control all the time is what I love to see. And then Sasha and Anne have another sword fight. Sasha and Grime realize that something is up with Andy, but of course, Sasha broke trust with Anne, so Anne doesn't believe a word out of her mouth. It's a well-done fight sequence with the added bonus of being able to side with either character, since their motives and the events leading up to them are justified. Anyhow, Anne wins, Andy regains control, and surprise, he's that much more of an a-hole.
Yes, of course, but please consider the following. Evil.
Everyone already figured that out, to be fair, but my god, did this crew do everything in their power to make you want to take Andy's stupid neck and wring it, if you were tall enough. Andreas does more than reveal his true intentions. He attempts to child murder constantly just because those children are standing in his way. He even smeckled over Marcy. Again. Shocker. Any and all of the fight scenes in this episode are absolute eye candy. Case in point, the moment Anne unlocks the power within her stone. I thought the blue stone being only partially charged would ruin everything, screwing up Anne's way back home and all that. But no, there was actually a payoff, and it makes for the best episode climax in the first 2 seasons. Not only does it subvert expectations, not only is the animation incredible, but it has a deep emotional core of Anne wanting her best friend back, which leaves the audience members in tears, in shock, or cheering for Anne. But there's still a couple minutes left. Obviously not enough time to resolve the story, but where's this gonna go? As much as I hold it against Disney for airing this scene at the price of a normal debut on network television for this episode, I can't say I'm surprised that this scene warranted a content warning at the beginning. Before you say, well, how is this worse than the Gravity Falls episode where the wall animals bleed from the eyes? First of all, yeah, seriously, how did that get by? And secondly, this episode is big, providing so many new insights on Marcy that weren't known to us yet. And this character, who has essentially taken center stage for the past 10 minutes of the episode, just got stabbed clean through the chest in cold blood without being able to fully receive anyone's forgiveness. If anyone of any age had been following the episode at all, I guarantee they'd be in shock. Undeniably, this is dark. And Anne is now back home, but with the Planters instead of Sasha and Marcy. Amphibia is now in ruins, the Planters aren't home, the girls are split up once again, and there is no immediate way back. This is how to make a cliffhanger ending impactful. Season 2 is the most tightly written, strongest structured, and has the most of Marcy. All this in a perfect way to cap off the season in devastation. Season 2 is easily the best of the three for all these reasons alone. I rest my case. There are three things you shouldn't bring up in a public discussion, purely because they are divisive enough to risk starting an argument just by a single mention of the topic. Those are religion, politics, and Amphibia Season 3. It seems like almost no one can agree on Season 3, so what do I think? I think it's amazing, except when it doesn't really make sense. As anyone does when discussing this season, we're going to look at Season 3A and Season 3B individually before judging the season on a whole. The two halves of the season are just so different that judging them together as one season would feel weird or like I didn't elaborate far enough. Both half seasons have their fair share of criticisms and praises, but it seems like everyone only likes one or the other, or at least easily knows their preference. Looking back, it's hard for me to decide, but I could echo that point in numerous ways before getting to it. Obviously, you guys would rather see the latter ASAP, so let's start with Season 3A, or the Earth Arc. Anne is back home, but at what cost? We meet Anne's folks, who are delightful, as well as a lot of other new human faces. The planters move in with the Boonshaws until there's a way back, and bam, there's our setup. But for some, this wasn't enough. It may have been nice to chill out in Los Angeles after nearly dying in a Studio Ghibli film, but something felt off. When True Colors premiered, search traffic for Amphibia went through the roof, there was fan art everywhere, and just generally the hype was real and real for a reason. New fans were attracted, and old fans were as excited as ever for what was to come. Many people expected a status quo change, and boy did we get one. Earth was now the show's primary setting. But there wasn't really a total shift in tone, which more people expected. The problem wasn't quite so much that some episodes didn't really bring up what happened in True Colors. Well, that's a lie. That was the problem. The fact that one of Anne's best friends literally died in front of her, and a few days later no one brings it up again, and we spend weeks on Earth with no one acknowledging anything, whether it be Sprig nearly falling to his death or the freaking stab, and Anne shows no sign of PTSD and very little trust issues. We get that a little in episode 4, which again I like to see, but I do agree that we didn't see as many repercussions as we should have. The way Anne and the planters just carried on very quickly and getting used to Earth life felt unsettling because they were acting as if this had always been the show. The season premiere is a really good follow-up episode from the season 2 finale, but seeing as it's definitely much more low-key than the explosive season finale it's coming off the heels of, it does kill a lot of the momentum that True Colors created. And I hate to say, but that momentum and hype only gets further lost in the dust as the Earth arc continues. I'm not angry though. I think it was inevitable that what came after True Colors wouldn't be on the same level as it. Unlike the previous season, where the goal of the first half of the season of getting to Newtopia was much more gradual, the objective of getting back to Amphibia of this season was basically either done or it wasn't. On Earth, the gang didn't have the Calamity Box, so they had to think outside the box to find a way back. They had to find people who knew a thing or two about portals, which wasn't easy, especially being in hiding from the FBI, who are also very plot relevant, mind you. All this, and Anne's parents are eventually in the know. Even if I would have liked if Anne let them in on Sasha and Marcy, then again, since the stab didn't get by without a content warning, I find it hard to believe they could have gotten by with bringing it up again. And of course, there's the argument that Anne was just traumatized and trying to repress the memory, which, credit where it's due, would make sense. Still, I would like to see some acknowledgement of it. It's sad. And then there's that scene from Escape to Amphibia. Okay, jokes aside, I'm sorry, but I actually hate this. It's not the fact that they reference the most shocking scene in the series in the form of a gag, but the fact that this is the closest thing we get to the stab ever being acknowledged again. Sure, Anne's parents never knew, but the way Anne just goes with it, we saw her shocked expression for a second, but still, like, just, come on man, that ain't cool. Alright, tangent over. And then there are the two episodes in 3A that takes place back in Amphibia, Turning Point and Olivia and Yunnan. Both 10 out of 10 episodes in my opinion. Turning Point was a believable and earned start to the best arc in Season 3. You really feel Sasha's guilt taking her over in this episode, and then at the end where she finally puts her pent-up emotions to good use to defend Wartwood, the audience feels rewarded and excited. And Olivia and Yunnan, my god, this episode. Nothing can measure quite the feeling of dread I had while watching this episode. Now, I was already aware that we were going to see what happened to Marcy in this episode, so I was already worried through most of the runtime. The outside world being in shambles, the nightmare simulation, and the crown jewel of this episode in terms of horror, the thing that makes this the most horrifying episode of the series, without a doubt in my mind, the ending and Marcy's possession. The tensions, the dread, what's about to happen, but seeing it coming isn't gonna make it any easier, and holy fucking shit. The scream, the red on black colors, Marcy's bones cracking as Darcy comes to life to the sound of the horrifying, unholy choir in the background. All this happening to the most lovable character on the show. I would have liked to see a couple more episodes like this one, but my heart couldn't have handled it. Oh, you should have seen r/Amphibia that day. That thing was in shambles. Wow, just wow. All that makes Olivia and Yunnan the scariest, most disturbing, and downright terrifying thing the show ever did. And to think its sister episode was a goofy Spider-Man parody, Jeebus crisp. And if at any moment, the Earth episodes weren't really accomplishing anything for the plot, to Shafrelis' point, Earth needed to be established at some point. We need to grow to care about this other world and characters, so the audience would feel impacted upon watching the invasion in the semi-final episode. Just imagine how much smaller the emotions and scale would feel if we didn't take the time to be endeared to this world and characters. Ultimately, Season 3A, while imperfect, does further the story, if at a slower rate than Season 2 did. Also, I just gotta say before we move on, the Christmas episode is one of the best in the show. I don't care which episode you consider the mid-finale, this or Escape to Amphibia, even though the latter was clearly written as such. A wholesome little reminder as to why I love this show gave me the warm fuzzies. That was pretty good too. Now, where were we? So as I was writing the script, I spent about 10 minutes pondering how to start. Season 3B, or the Resistance arc. Do I think it's bad? Not at all. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Sasha's new look is great, and the first episode of the War Prep saga, Commander Anne, is a solid introduction to the final change of status quo that does some noteworthy legwork to further Sasha's character, as well as reveal her to be attracted to women. We have a pretty epic setup. Anne and the Planters back in Amphibia are now fighting for the resistance group Sasha and Grime have formed with the Frogs, until Andy unleashes war on both worlds. The episode that follows Commander Anne, Sprivy, takes a couple I usually ship and makes Sprig and Ivy annoying as hell. This episode clearly should have been about the two of them wanting to have a day out together after not seeing each other for like a month. Sprig and Ivy have spent most of their relationship apart anyway, so here more than ever it would have made sense that they wanted a little time together. But the way they just don't even act like actual couples do in this particular episode, and how they suddenly can't stand to be apart for even a moment, drives one insane, especially since they have in all other episodes together. This is why Sprivy is quite possibly the most obnoxious episode of the whole show. Unbelievable. But whatever, that episode literally accomplishes nothing, and you're not going to miss jack squat by skipping it. Back to the real Resistance episodes. Most of the Resistance episodes follow a structure. The main crew encounter an old friend from one of the first two seasons, they help that character with their problem, or make peace with them in case the character is a villain, and then they get recruited for the Resistance. It's a solid formula, and I didn't really get tired of it. Not counting the finale arc at the very end of Season 3, there are, 10 episodes in Season 3B? And 4 of them are specifically about army building episodes. Grime's Pupil, The Root of Evil, Newts and Tights, and Fight or Flight. I actually really like these episodes, at least in a vacuum. Each is pretty unique and a lot of fun. Grime's Pupil does the job of recruiting Beatrix, while also to an extent acknowledging and resolving some past events. The Root of Evil is an awesome Midsummer parody that cleverly reintroduces Apothecary Gary in a time where spore collars are being used to control the minds of amphibians. Newts and Tights is a fun Robin Hood sort of story that brings back the perfect character for an episode of its kind, and Fight or Flight brings back Domino 2 to be used as air cavalry, and is also very neat. Oh, and The Three Armies, mid-episode, but it does a nice job of setting the stage for the final episodes. But what frustrates fans is the fact that the recruits didn't matter so much in the end, just distracting Andy while the important characters go on a rescue mission. Technically, the army building episodes can't be skipped, since they appear in the beginning of the end, which is not an optional episode by any stretch of the imagination. But the episodes almost feel like they didn't do a lot for the story on the whole. Fight or Flight is a possible exception, since Domino 2 shows up and helps the main characters in the final 2 episodes. I've got to be grateful for the fight scene in the beginning of the end, because it's a pretty cool scene that makes the recruitment episodes feel as important as ever. However, how little the recruited characters have to do with the whole finale kinda made the last half season feel like a waste of time. I can't really point the finger at a specific episode, since I liked the army building episodes and loved the finale arc, But that's gotta be the worst thing about this season, if I'm being honest. It's just a shame. But it's definitely more of a climactic endgame battle than Adventure Time, credit where it's due. But the 3B episodes that aren't strictly recruitment episodes, ironically did much more for the overall plot. Sasha's Angels showed that Sasha really has grown to care about the Frogs of Wartwood, proving she's changed. Hometown Road recontextualized an old Season 2 episode I wasn't crazy about, and again pushed towards Sasha's redemption, even if it did contain the obvious cartoon cliche of
10 seconds till activation. Then again, this is a cartoon, so it'll probably take about a minute.
Mother of Olms introduced us to Mother Olm and gave us a better idea of the prophecy, and The Core and the King is a fantastic villain backstory episode for Andreas that sheds so much revealing light on him, and will indeed be important later on. Ultimately, not a lot of the time back in Amphibia was totally necessary after True Colors tied up a lot of loose ends, but if there were only a few episodes in Season 3, it'd have probably felt that much more rushed. While I do wish Season 3B had a little more of a sense of finality to it before the last episodes, truthfully, I wouldn't have it any other way. Overall, both halves of Season 3 have their imperfections. It's not hard at all to see why this season is the most divisive. Not necessarily the one with the widest range of responses, but the one that's the most up for debate, and has differing opinions that won't go down without a fight. Why haven't I talked much about the actual finale? Well, that's its own beastie. Hold on. The final 3 episodes of Amphibia make up an impeccable finale. The crew went all in and did everything to make an astounding, emotional, and overall satisfying as possible finale. Another thing this show did that I wish so many others would: divide the finale across multiple episodes to make it more believable. Each episode is a different length, but that actually gives each episode its own feeling, so you can identify it separately, even if they work best as a whole. For a while, I debated if I considered the beginning of the end part of the finale arc. On one hand, it's kinda just the episode that sets the final battles into motion, but it does also lead into the storm, so what's my conclusion? Yes, it undeniably is a part of the finale. Maybe All In introduced more themes, like Anne finally reflecting on the adventures she's been through right before her one-on-one with Andy, and Sasha's redemption arc coming full circle. But these episodes flow into each other absolutely seamlessly. The victories, the emotions, and everyone's fates make this an incredibly strong way to resolve all the conflicts that the characters face. In the beginning of the end, where Anne and Sasha argue about whether or not Marcy deserves their forgiveness, only to meet Darcy and realize what happened in a delightfully dark and dreadful scene, with a marvelous atmosphere and high tensions. In All In, where everything starts happening at once, almost every major character comes together for the Resistance's last stand. And I'll talk about the hardest thing in a bit. Lots to say there, but I need to talk about the previous episode first. All In leaves no one sidelined. Everyone here has a pivotal role that the episode would not be the same without. It seems hopeless. Our heroes have been captured, and even if they escape, they've still got a floating castle looming above them with a cluster of preserved intelligence closely following their every move. But everyone comes together to make a plan that works, all the while putting the whole series up till then in retrospect to acknowledge how much everyone's grown. And to say that I love that would be an understatement. I might as well start there. The fight scenes and scale of this episode are awesome. They create a great atmosphere, they feel earned and believable. The Sasha vs. Darcy fight is incredibly animated, gives the feels when Grime loses his arm, and is the perfect boss for Sasha, where she can finally put her growth as a person to the best use possible, stand up to an ancient hive mind of manipulative control freaks, and save her friend in the process. Oh, and the mini-boss with the herons who killed Sprig and Polly's parents? They didn't have to do this, but it was a great way to give the planters some closure that I never knew I needed, by finally standing up to them. And remember how I brought up Anne's 1v1 with Andy? Yeah, that was nothing short of amazing. The animation and visuals are incredible. There are buildings collapsing, the characters use K-pop to power Anne back up, and it somehow makes the scene 10 times better. And that's just the icing on the cake. The meaning behind this big battle goes so much deeper. I guess it's as good a time as any to finally discuss Andreas. When we met him in Season 2, most of us predicted King Andy would turn out to be a twist villain, and what do you know, he was. But not officially until True Colors. But until then, he was presented as a jolly grandfather, fun-loving sort of character. But since his villain reveal was pretty obvious, and even clearly shown to us once or twice, the writers tried their hardest to make it still surprising by making him ruthless, manipulative, and an all-around horrible guy. Many fans want this guy defeated or killed as his fate. He's gone from ally to mortal enemy and can't go back. Or so we were convinced. Think back to Olivia and Yudan. After he got Marcy possessed, everyone hated him more than ever. But remember earlier in the episode where he was talking to someone and seemed very concerned about subjecting someone to a device that they hadn't tested yet? Well, we later learned that those someones were the Core and Marcy respectively. No one wanted to believe Andreas when he told Marcy he always liked her, too busy wanting him dead for what he was doing anyway. But there are so many subtle touches that make you think maybe, just maybe, he can be redeemed after all. Similarly to Anne, he had a few friends he didn't want to lose. And if you go through some difficult emotional trust issues with someone who's very close to you, you can either hold that against them and bury feelings until you have someone or something to take them out on, or make an attempt to better yourself and your relationship with that person. In the flashback in All In, Andy is shown to have always been charmed by Marcy's personality. The pain he caused hurt him as much as it hurt her. He can't even look Marcy in the eyes when they finally say goodbye to each other. Ultimately, he's just too ridden with shame. And learning that Leaf didn't lose all care for him just because she had to do something she didn't want, he surrenders. He opens his heart so Anne can pry right through it. This is why this fight is the most important of the series. It proves that Anne has grown enough to stand up to the kind of person she would have become in a much darker timeline. That, and the fact alone that I wanted to see a guy who I thought was irredeemable be redeemed, effectively makes King Andreas one of the best cases of a villain redemption I have ever seen. Not to mention, Marcy finally accepted the harsh reality she had been avoiding for months. Good, because the Core is creepy. But seriously, that scene where the girls finally catch up and reaffirm Marcy that the fact that nothing can change their love and appreciation for her is what I was waiting all season for. And since the second to last episode brought up the themes of moving on as things come full circle, all the final episode had to do was carry over those themes and use them to finish off the story. The hardest thing is an episode that requires the context of the other finale episodes, but is absolutely phenomenal. The anime battle with the moon, despite not having as much meaning as the boss fights in All In, is nothing short of an animated spectacle. The smooth animation, the bright colors leaping off the screen, the way the girls just get to have some fun during their final battle. Anne's death scene is absolutely tragic and heart-wrenching, even if she ultimately came back in the end. It's still bound to give you the feels. I don't even care that she came back in a way that was kind of sudden. The idea that an immortal multiversal guardian wanted Anne to take her place is just another thing to show how selfless Anne has become. But it was the best, most beautiful opportunity to summarize the message of the show. No one is perfect, but mistakes build strength. Every obstacle we ever hit, there was a way around it. And everyone managed to start anew and become a new person eventually. As much as Anne would make a great new goddess of the multiverse, I totally understand why she gave it up in the end. One last time, the characters remark how far they've come, and how far they still have to go, and why Anne would rather continue down that path, so she can continue improving, and one day feel truly worthy. The goodbye scene will leave you in tears, even if you've grown a little attached to these people. There are other series finales that get to you, but this particularly hurts, knowing they can never see each other again. It is devastating, but all the better for it. Yes, I cried, you already know that. And the epilogue that follows is just the best possible icing on the cake. I honestly love the little detail about Anne and Sasha drifting apart, since it's realistic proof of the episode and the show's moral. As much as it happens where old friends don't spend as much time together as they figure out who they individually are, it doesn't mean it was because your relationship got worse. There are friends who I haven't spent time with in a while, but even if you find friends who are just generally better for you in particular, it's still absolutely possible for old friends to leave an impression on you that will last forever. Does that sound familiar? And it is only further exemplified by the girls meeting back up again for Anne's 23rd birthday, years after she and Sasha fell out of touch, and Marcy moved away. The final 10 minutes of this show are its best by far. The conclusion left for these characters is beyond satisfying, and all I could have asked for. But that's not all this is for me. I'm gonna let you in on something. Amphibia wrapped up right around the same time I was finishing middle school. And for a while, I had struggled with my self-worth, and if I was getting weaker just because life was getting harder. And a few weeks before the show was ending, I asked myself, was this really my favorite show? I kinda just declared that it was when I first found this show. I mean, I was initially immediately sold on it, and it had imperfections, but do I love the show any less than I thought? And I can't believe it took seeing the actual finale to fully realize it. No matter what, I can't deny that this show got me to check out a couple of other awesome shows of its time, like Big City Greens and The Owl House, but it went so far beyond that. Watching Anne talk about how she didn't used to love herself, and then at last standing up to King Andreas, really made me reflect on my life up until then. I realized I was a new person, and maybe I went to a certain awards ceremony at the end of that school year, and maybe I won a certain citizenship certificate. Honestly, that was the most accomplished I have ever felt in my life. And in that moment, I finally realized how much I was worth. How much it applies to everyone. All the people in my life. Sure, me and my friends have a long way to go, as I try to be someone a little more worthy of becoming a god when I die, as unlikely as that is. Being seen and recognized as a good citizen means so much more to me than good grades or whatever. And at the end of that journey, there were definitely people I had to say goodbye to. Which makes sense. As phases of your life end, things come full circle, and you end up having to say goodbye to people. Whether that be teachers from that time, all the wonderful people I worked with. And while I thankfully didn't have to leave any friends behind, gangs definitely changed in high school, right? Not that I hope to leave my friends eventually, you guys are awesome. But you see my point. Sure, I still have a long way to go, but if I ever look back and wonder why I felt so particularly accomplished, I can go back to this finale and remember all that led up to it. That's why Amphibia resonates with me so much. Honestly, as much as I'm willing to throw money at a shiny tie-in book, the show itself ended so perfectly that I don't even want any more of Amphibia. That, let alone changing my life, makes this my favorite series finale of all time. And that alone is enough to make this my favorite show in recent memory. Disney or otherwise, animated or otherwise. And if that's the case, it should go without saying that these episodes are my favorite of the entire series, without question. Even though I just spoiled the whole series, one last time I'm gonna say, if you haven't seen Amphibia, binge it. I hope to the Guardian you don't mind a slow burn at the beginning, because it gets to be so much more. Anyway, if I can't get another video out by Christmas or whatever you celebrate, happy holidays. I should probably go rewatch Amphibia in its entirety, so please like, subscribe, share, and please, have a great rest of your day.